They left you, and you still think about them. You lie awake as the night passes. You try not to write, not to check what they are doing. You try to convince yourself that it's over. But your mind keeps replaying that one moment, how they left, how they felt nothing anymore, how they replaced you with someone else, someone who might be prettier, more exciting, more relaxed, younger, someone who has no idea what you've been through, what you've given, what you've sacrificed. And now you're asking yourself, why? Why weren't you enough? What was missing? Why were you replaceable? This video is for you. It's not some shallow advice, not toxic motivation, not an emotional trap. This is a path through the fog, a Stoic perspective on what happened to you. We're going to talk about pain, about disappointment, about the feeling of being replaced. We'll talk about how you can still win, not by pretending, not by bending, but by realizing your worth. You'll learn why it's actually a good thing they left, why leaving doesn't make them stronger but weaker, because they didn't endure. You'll understand why you don't have to fight to be missed. You'll realize why you don't need to get louder to be heard. You just need to become quieter so they're forced to hear themselves. Stoicism is not cold. Stoicism is clarity. We will organize your thoughts, realign your energy, and you will learn how not to return from the ashes, but to rise from them. And when you do, you won't just be free. You'll be dangerous, because nothing is more powerful than someone who belongs to themselves. Stay here, because what's coming will change you. Not because I give you something, but because you'll take back what you forgot was yours. Your dignity, your strength, your silence. They thought they found something better. They saw someone new, exciting, different, untouched. Someone who didn't know how complicated they can be. Someone who hasn't yet seen how they withdraw, how they say things they don't mean, how they pull away when things get tight. You were familiar, you were real, and you were there. But that became too normal for them. They forgot what they had in you because they believed what you gave was automatic. They threw away gold thinking it was sand. And now they walk through the world with shiny eyes, believing they've found something better. But what they really have is just something different. Not better, just new, not deeper, just thrilling for a moment. The new one doesn't know their favorite songs. He doesn't know why they pull the blanket up to their chin when falling asleep. He doesn't see their insecurities yet because they still hide them. He might think they are easy, calm, uncomplicated, but you know they are only like that in the beginning. You've seen their shadows, and still you held them. Still you understood. Still you loved. They think you were the problem. Because you had boundaries. Because you were tired. Because you were honest. Because you stopped fighting when you were the only one still trying. But the truth is, they never saw what you were to them. Because they believed love is a feeling and not a decision. And now they sit there with someone who hasn't yet questioned their decision. With someone who doesn't know that they already lost someone else long ago. You were not replaceable. You were unique. You were the one who remembered things they never said out loud. You were the one who saw something was wrong in the morning even when they smiled. You were the one who listened at night even when you were tired. You were the one who made plans, knowing you'd always be the one who remembered. And now they believe the new one is better. But one day they will realize that different doesn't mean better. That new isn't automatically valuable. That depth isn't felt instantly, but only once it's lost. And one day, in a moment where you no longer think of them, they will realize they lost someone who saw them when they couldn't even see themselves. someone who stayed even when it got hard, someone who didn't play games. They will think you've changed, that you've suddenly become strong, so quiet, so calm. But the truth is, you're not different. You've simply returned to your center, and that center is what they're missing. They removed themselves from the relationship, not you. You don't need to show them what they lost. They will feel it without your help. You don't need to prove you were better. They'll make the comparison on their own. And the pain won't come from the fact that you left. It will come from knowing they willingly let go of someone who never should have left. You were never the mistake in the story. You were the chapter they never understood until the book was closed. They lost you. And maybe they don't understand that yet. Maybe they're laughing. Maybe they look happy. Maybe it seems like they're finally living the life they always wanted. But what they lost cannot be replaced. Because you weren't just there. You were present. You weren't just kind. You were attentive. You weren't just someone who loved. You were someone who felt, who thought, who observed, who protected. You weren't loud. You were deep. You weren't perfect, but you were real. And that is something no new person can immediately replace. They don't know yet what's missing. They might think your silence means indifference, but it means dignity. They might think your calm means you've moved on, but it only shows you've found clarity. You did things they'll only remember when they realize no one else does them now. You gave small gestures no one else noticed. You listened to their tone of voice. You knew when they lied without meaning harm. You sensed when they needed affection, even when they asked for space. You made meals without being asked. You left the light on when they came home late. You carried their mistakes. You endured their moods. You felt their fears and didn't judge them. You held them in moments when they couldn't hold themselves. And they won't miss these things until silence arrives. When the first rush of new love fades, when the surface cracks and there's no depth beneath it, they will remember you, not because you were loud, but because you never forgot who they truly were. They will compare, not because you were perfect, but because you were honest. You were the one who stayed when things got hard, the one who reached out, even when you had nothing left. And someday, late at night, lying beside someone who doesn't truly know them, your name will pass through their mind, not because they want to come back, but because they'll realize they will never find someone like you again. Because people like you are rare. People who don't give up, who don't play games, who don't run when things get difficult. People who love without conditions but with principles. That is your uniqueness. And they will only recognize it once they're far enough away to understand what closeness really meant, what consistency was, what it felt like to be truly seen. You weren't a chapter. You were the foundation. They thought you were ordinary. And that will be their greatest mistake. You don't need to do anything. Nothing. No messages. No posts. No reactions. You don't need to make yourself visible. You don't need to pretend you're thriving. You don't need to act like you've moved on. The greatest power lies not in doing, but in not doing. That is the essence of Stoicism. Don't fight the pain. Recognize it. Don't try to rewrite the past. Let it stand. Don't hope they'll return. Realize you've already moved on. They left you, but they didn't destroy you. You feel hurt. Yes. Disappointed. Yes. Maybe broken. But inside you is something they never touched. Your inner stance. Your ability to choose what to do with your pain. You can use it to grow, to become quieter, clearer. You don't need to strike back. The best revenge is needing none. They won't break because you took something from them. They'll break because one day they'll realize what they threw away. You were their anchor, and they let go. You were deep, and they chose the surface. But depth always returns. It never disappears. And eventually everything falls back to its natural level. You are not a spare part, not a toy, not someone who loses themselves just because others couldn't hold on. You're not here to fill their emptiness. You're here to live your clarity. And clarity doesn't come with noise, it comes with silence. What you're doing now is more powerful than any reaction. You're walking your path. No drama, no conflict, no neediness. You're working on yourself. You stay in motion. And that's exactly what will unsettle them the most. Because nothing is harder to bear than the thought that you never needed them. When they realize that you're not waiting, that you're not hoping, that you're no longer asking what went wrong. When they see you don't react, that you don't provoke, that you don't suffer in silence, but that you found yourself again. That's when the weight of their decision will come back, not because you punished them, but because you left them alone. And in that silence, something will begin to grow. Regret. Not because you were perfect, but because you never gave up on yourself. The Stoic does not fight the outside world. He organizes his inner world. He lets the world rage and remains rooted in himself. And that's exactly what you're doing right now. You're not waiting for them to fail. You're building your own strength. And when you do that, you won't just be free. You'll be untouchable. You're not moving on because you have to. You're moving on because you realize your path never depended on who walked it with you. You didn't lose. You were released from an illusion. The illusion that love means being held even when you're not seen. But now you see. And that is the beginning of your new path. You're not walking out of revenge. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not here to show them how strong you are. You're here to remember who you are and who you always were before you thought you had to shrink yourself to be loved. This path you're walking now is quiet. It's powerful, not loud. You start asking yourself what you truly need, what feels right for you, what you feel when no one is shaping you. You become new, not because you change, but because you unfold. You become calmer, clearer, more selective. You stop showing your heart to everyone. You stop justifying yourself with every sentence. You learn that you don't have to prove you're enough. You begin to care for yourself, not out of defiance, but out of respect. You start learning again, not to impress anyone, but because you feel yourself growing. You take care of your health, your time, your boundaries. You don't become hard, you become awake. And you realize that you never lost anything that was truly meant for you. On this path, things get quieter. People leave, expectations fade, old desires lose their power. But with every layer that falls away, more of your real self comes to light. And that's not a loss. That's a return to you. They won't understand what's happening inside you. Maybe they'll think you've forgotten them. Maybe they'll think you found someone new. Maybe they'll think you're cold or angry. But what's really happening is much deeper. You've stepped into clarity. And from that clarity comes no hate, no rage. Just a quiet, gentle no. A no to anything that keeps you small. A no to anything that bends you out of shape. A no to any kind of love that makes you weaker instead of stronger. This is your new path. No battle, no show. just presence, just self-respect, just truth. And in the end, that will speak louder than any message, any apology, any regret. You say nothing. You post nothing. You don't write, and you don't explain. And that is exactly what one day they won't be able to bear. Your silence, your calm, your absence, while they may be waiting for you to reach out, to talk, to fight, to justify yourself. You do none of that. You stay grounded. And in that silence lies a force louder than anything you could ever say. They wonder why you're not reacting, whether you still care, whether you've met someone else, whether you're hurt or already moved on. They'll have that conversation in their own minds, the one you never had. Over and over, louder and louder. They'll question whether you still think of them. And with every day you stay silent, they'll feel less certain. Because your silence is not an accident. It is a decision. It is clarity. It is strength. It is the moment you rise above the drama, when you are no longer part of their confusion, no longer the net they can fall into whenever they want. You've taken yourself out of the game, and now it doesn't matter who wins or loses. You didn't cause a scene. You didn't beg for answers. You didn't ask questions you already knew the answers to. You just let go. And that moment wasn't weakness. It was proof that you've learned to hold yourself. They will hear you in songs, in scents, in places, in conversations with others who don't go as deep as you did. They will feel the difference between attention and real presence, between interest and true connection, between closeness and actual belonging. And one day, maybe late at night when they're alone, it won't be what you said that haunts them. It'll be what you no longer say, what you no longer ask, what you no longer give. The silence will become a mirror, and in that mirror they'll see what they lost, not because you punished them, but because you saved yourself. And that salvation has a cost for them, because you're no longer available, no longer open, no longer reachable. You're no longer the door they could open whenever they wanted. The quiet revenge isn't revenge in the classic sense. It's proof of your inner alignment, of your decision to choose yourself over the echo of the past. You don't fight. You don't prove. You're simply silent. And that silence is the loudest proof that you never needed them. Now you sit here, maybe calmer, maybe still hurt, maybe still full of unanswered questions. But something has shifted. You've understood something. You don't need a reaction. You don't need revenge. You don't need validation from the outside. What you need is already within you. Your dignity, your stance, your strength. And that is what Stoicism gives you. Not the comfort that everything will be okay, but the clarity that you remain standing, even when nothing feels okay. You realize that your worth doesn't rise or fall depending on whether someone chooses you or leaves you. You understand that you are free the moment you stop clinging. You realize that the greatest victory is not that they come back, but that you never lose yourself again. The pain will fade. The memory will remain. But even it will grow quiet. And one day, that day will come when you look back and you are no longer sad, but grateful. Not because it was beautiful, but because it made you grow. That is the quiet power of Stoicism. No noise, no drama, just clarity. If this video has given you strength, subscribe now to this channel for more clarity in your everyday life. And tell me in the comments, what have you let go of in order to come back to yourself? I read every message. Your path begins now, and you won't walk it alone. you'll walk it with strength. Through clarity,